The State Capture Commission of Inquiry is expected to respond to the letter released by Jacob Zuma's lawyers, accusing it of lacking impartiality and being prejudiced against their client. The letter also says there's an agenda to try and turn the public against the former president. Well, let's get some detail now. ENCA's Michael Apple is at the inquiry in Parktown, and he joins us live now. So, Mike, this letter that ENCA has independently obtained, talk to us about some of the scathing contents of that letter.
Well, scathing indeed, accusing the state capture inquiry basically of being a kangaroo court that has already determined the guilt of President Jacob Zuma, if you could put it that way, the former president, saying that, reiterating his request that he gets questions up front. This is something that has not been afforded to any other witness that has testified before this inquiry. Oli, I'd like to bring in somebody who knows the Commission of Inquiry very well, my colleague Aaron Bates. Let's start there. Is there anybody that has testified before this Commission of Inquiry who has gotten questions up front?
Not to our knowledge, and not from any indications from any of the proceedings that we've had or any of the communiques from the spokesperson for the State Capture Inquiry. There is no precedent here for receiving questions in advance. However, counsel for the former president say they only asked for those questions in writing because they want clarity on the issues that will be traversed with him over those 5 days in the middle of July.
The letter from Mr. Mancha says it's going to treat, or it's already treating, the former president as an accused. Interesting that.
Certainly. So Lunkisani Daniel Mancha has stood before Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo before on behalf of the former president and expressed a will to cooperate with the Commission of Inquiry. That will is reiterated in the letter that we've seen from Mancha to the Commission on behalf of the former president. It also includes the president or former president's own views on the Commission and a claim of prejudice against him, a claim almost of a predetermined outcome against him. So I just want to refer exactly to that. He believes, and this is Zuma himself, the Commission is prejudiced against him and lacks the requisite impartiality regarding any information that he will give the Commission. This lines up with what his counsel, his lawyers themselves have said in the letter, expressing a view that the Commission has entered the domain of politics by releasing a statement on the 20th of June. That was the same time that they sent a letter to counsel for Zuma after 6 weeks of negotiations back and forth.
He accuses the inquiry of impartiality, but logic dictates that you hear one side of the story, people will come and give evidence, which has named the former president several times. Several people, 13, will get to them. How do you balance that? Surely it's to come and give your side of the story.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't have only one version of events and then reach a balanced conclusion. And that's the very issue, is that if we don't hear from the former president, if he isn't given the chance to give his version of events, his story of what happened during his tenure as president, then we have a completely imbalanced Commission of Inquiry. And the mandate, as set out in the terms of reference, declare that he needs to be interrogated. It's in the terms of reference. To not hear from him would probably turn this into more of a kangaroo court than he already claims it is.
Let's get into the nuts and bolts here. 13 people have given evidence implicating the former president in, well, tell us what he's been implicated in.
A whole bunch of things, and it's important to note that it is at least 13 witnesses before the Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption and fraud. We know the former president time and again has asked, what is state capture? What have I done? And before we go through that list, important just to note, I was reviewing Nwako Ramatlhori's evidence, the former Mineral Resources Minister. He said before the ANC recalled Zuma, those are his words, then ANC Secretary General Gwede Mantashe and then Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa went to Zuma to discuss the matter with him, right toward the tail end of his presidency. They claim that in that meeting, and this is Ramatlhori's evidence, Zuma asked, what have I done? Well, Ramatlhori's answer is Zuma, he auctioned off executive authority. So Ramatlhori has implicated him. We've heard from Nhlanhla Nene, we've heard from Kabisi Jonas, Fakey Mentor, Barbara Hogan, the list goes on and on. Public Enterprises Minister Praveen Gordhan, Johan Boyson, Robert McBride, Themba Maseko from GCIS. The list goes on and on. Rajesh Sundaram, who testified after travelling here from India, talking about meetings with the Gupta brothers and the then president to talk about ANN7 and its editorial bent. The list includes at least 13 people, if not more, and the variation in terms of how severe the allegations are obviously varies. But the likes of the Treasury witnesses we heard from, the likes of Nene, Jonas, Gordon, all testifying that there was this breakdown between National Treasury, which is the bulwark against the economy basically falling apart, and the president, particularly over the nuclear deal, was one of the key issues at the time.
Let's speak about just how cryptic Mr. Mancha was. Headlines are going to say he will be appearing from the 15th of July to the 19th. But do we know that for certain?
Well, the wording is quite interesting, and if you look at the letter with a fine-tuned comb, or you go through it with a fine-tuned comb, mixing up my metaphors here, he doesn't say that Zuma will testify. He says Zuma will appear at the Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption and fraud. Now, I appear in this hall many days of many weeks because I come here to do my work. Whether or not that's a veiled insinuation that Zuma may not in fact testify, that he may be in the room and his lawyers may then stand to argue why they should still receive questions in writing, we don't know at this point. If you give the former head of state the benefit of the doubt, perhaps he is simply saying that he will come here and give his version under oath, but we don't have that on record as yet. The other thing that you also should note from the letter and its wording, which I think is particularly telling, is it says quite early on that the counsel for Zuma note that the commission, or whoever is instructing the commission, there's an insinuation there that somebody somewhere above the Commission of Inquiry is calling the shots. And as to who that is not clear at this point.
Ironically, he's the man that signed this whole thing into law. Yes, under the instruction, the binding recommendation of then Public Protector Thuli Madonsela. But he created everything here. Is there something to be made, and we're not entering into the realm of speculation here, but the way in which his legal counsel has handled his criminal trial and the way that they are handling this Commission of Inquiry?
Well, that's certainly a matter of opinion. You could draw parallels between the Stalingrad tactic we know that Zuma and his legal team have used in various legs of litigation in the High Court, the Supreme Court of Appeal, the Constitutional Court, and what we've seen here at the Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture. From the tone of the letter, it's likely that him and his counsel would take issue with that kind of interpretation. And it's interesting you say everything here he created. You can read that in two ways. You can read it in terms of what we've heard in terms of the allegations against the former head of state, and also, of course, in terms of signing into effect the public protector's recommendations, the same recommendations he time and again challenged through the legal system, right up until the point where he was found wanting in terms of his understanding of her binding recommendations, and then fighting a costs order on that. So at every possible turn, Zuma has arguably fought getting this commission into effect, and now actually appearing before it and giving his version of what happened during his tenure as head of state.
The inquiry unlikely to take this scathing letter from Jacob Zuma's legal counsel lying down. What do we expect coming out of the inquiry? Well,
certainly we have been in touch with the spokesperson for the Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption and fraud. All we know at this point is that they are set to provide some kind of commentary or input following Zuma's letter and the information that he will appear, read into that what you will, on the 15th of July.
Aaron Bates, thank you very much. Liam Gambi, he will appear, but as we've said, rather cryptic, whether he will appear here with us here in the public gallery or if he's going to be taking the hot seat there as a witness.